you end up doing, I think, almost 5 years combined in banking between Morgan Stanley and Code. And then you leave to go do corp dev at SurveyMonkey. Corporate development, I think, is pretty well understood as a typical IB exit op. But then after that, you left SurveyMonkey to join Slack to help them build out the sales operations team. So for people who have never worked in sales operations, because I feel like that's like, it's not something you hear about as much. What exactly does sales ops do? And what do you think, what kind of person or what kind of makeup does someone need to have to be successful in that type of role? Because I know you built like the entire sales ops team at Slack from, I don't know if it was like from just you to eventually being like 30 people or something, right? And you guys were supporting, was like a 1,500 person sales org. So it was a huge team that obviously drove a ton of revenue for Slack. So like, I'm sure you've done a bunch of recruiting and hiring and interviewing and just knowing like, and also being able to do the pattern recognition on like, who are some of your best hires, who are the not so good hires, and what do they have in common? So can you kind of speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, well, first of all, just like finding my way to sales operations was very much a happy coincidence. Really, what I was solving for is like working for an iconic company. And when I was at SurveyMonkey, we were a beta customer for Slack. So I was using
Mm,
Slack early before it was a household name. And I saw kind of firsthand that it was fun. It helped me with productivity. It accelerated my efficiency. So um, success breeds success. And what I mean by that is I went to work for SurveyMonkey because Dave Goldberg was, he has passed away since, unfortunately. Dave was, a really renowned leader. And I didn't have a passion for surveys. You know, it wasn't a prerequisite to join the company. But I remember when I was at Code and Quincy and I would have very transparent conversations of like, hey, eventually I want to go in house. And actually, just like to connect the dots with the earlier part of the conversation, I felt like at Morgan Stanley, even though everybody knew you were recruiting, you were like not allowed to talk about it almost.
mm,
At Code Advisors, I was able to openly talk about my career aspirations and ambitions. And, because I won the trust and I added value to the organization, they were
yeah.
very much like willing to support me. And so Quincy was able to open doors, make connections, and did so in a very gracious way. And so, so I went to work for Dave Goldberg, really. Yes, I went to work for SurveyMonkey, but I really went to work for Dave Goldberg. That was my thesis.
He's was married to Sheryl Sandberg. Is that the guy?
Exactly.
Got
Exactly.
it. Okay. Cool. Sorry, continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. So, but I think that might be kind of like the common thread earlier in my career. Like, was Code Advisors going to be successful? Is it going to be the right place for me? I don't know. Paul Chamberlain, who is a banker that I work with and respect, vouches for Quincy, and there's some other stuff. Let's do it. Or, Quincy vouches for Dave Goldberg as an exceptional, operator and CEO. I'm going to go work for Dave.
Yeah.
And then, I didn't know anybody at Slack, but, Slack is an iconic product that I firsthand, believe in. And that was probably like a pivot a little bit in my thinking away from like solving for the people and less and like more solving for the product. It was kind of like that mentality. I think actually it was Sheryl Sandberg that might have said it, like, join the rocket ship. Don't worry about your seat in the rocket ship. So,
Yeah.
so I joined Slack and I was like in a generalist biz ops role, kind of like project based initiatives. And then very shortly into my time there, our CEO at Slack, Stuart Butterfield, he says, we're going to go after the enterprise segments. We're going to build out a proper sales organization. We're going to graduate from being kind of a product led growth business, self service business. We're going to go for those larger transaction sizes, which require, a human-led selling effort. And so I raised my hand and I said, I want to participate in that. Um, because I, showed up and had energy and had just like intellectual horsepower, I was afforded the opportunity to do that. And the way it worked out is Stuart hired a head of sales. His name is Bob Fratty. Bob brought in a lieutenant of his from Salesforce to lead, go-to-market strategy operations. And that person needed to build a team. And so I was essentially like his first hire, give or take. And I did like sales commissions at first. And I don't know if anybody in this podcast knows about sales commissions. There's actually a lot of depth to it if you do it right. But
Yeah.
like at the fundamental layer, it's like a very simple spreadsheet that any banker could do with their eyes closed.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I remember really struggling. I'm like, I'm at this amazing company, Slack. It's clearly going places, but I'm doing, Excel spreadsheets that are quote unquote below me because I'm a banker by background.
Mm,
I crushed it. And then I had the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And next thing you know, as you said earlier, I was able to build out a pretty large team. I was able to work on my leadership skills and my people management skills and my recruiting skills. And
yeah.
that was really the turning point for me to really kind of like grow into the opportunity that was in front of me. That was at Slack.
Yeah. Man, that's that's an awesome story, man. And that quote by Sheryl Sandberg is so on point because I've been at a couple tech startups similarly, like Square and GitHub, rocket ships, like doesn't really matter what your seat is, just like get on, right? And honestly, these companies, they're going to be rocket ships with or without us, right? Obviously, you're still contributing to their success once you're there, but it's like you want to, if you're going to bet your career and invest all of your time and energy for, I guess you ended up being there for like 6 years, for example. That's a very long time. I also have friends that worked 6 years at a startup that ended up being worth nothing, right? And that is like, just from speaking to them, like one of the most demoralizing things ever, right? I've worked at a tech startup that ended up being worth nothing, but luckily I only spent a little over a year there, so it wasn't as bad, right?